Adrian Lim, a respected Singaporean doctor, and Maria Santos, a bright Filipina nurse, shared a secret affair that would shatter lives, spark a shocking revenge, and leave a trail of betrayal no one saw coming. Dr. Adrian Lim's life seemed like a storybook. In Singapore, he was admired for his intelligence, dedication, and charm. As a leading cardiologist at one of the city's top hospitals, he commanded respect from colleagues and patients alike. Families trusted him with their lives, and his name carried weight in medical circles. At home, he was a devoted husband and a loving father to 2 young children, often praised for maintaining the perfect balance between career and family. From the outside, nothing about Adrian's life appeared flawed. Every morning, he walked through the pristine corridors of the hospital in a crisp white coat, greeting everyone with a confident smile. His reputation was flawless, and he took pride in his disciplined routine. Yet beneath this polished exterior, a subtle emptiness lingered. The routine of patient rounds, administrative meetings, and domestic life left him craving a spark of unpredictability. Adrian's mind often wandered to what he called moments of freedom, brief escapes from the rigidity of his orderly life. He longed for a thrill that neither success nor comfort could provide, a sensation that made him feel truly alive. When Maria Santos arrived at the hospital, everything began to shift. She was a young nurse from the Philippines, transferred from another hospital with glowing recommendations. Her cheerful demeanor and easy confidence drew attention, but Adrian noticed something different. There was an energy about her, a combination of intelligence and warmth that intrigued him immediately. Observing her effortless way of connecting with patients, he felt both admiration and an unexplainable pull. As days passed, Adrian found himself anticipating her presence, lingering in her vicinity during rounds, noticing small details, the way she smiled at a patient, the way she handled difficult situations calmly. It was innocent at first, subtle and unspoken, but the seed of a hidden connection had been planted, one that would grow into something far more dangerous than either of them could imagine. Adrian and Maria's paths crossed more frequently than either expected. At first, it was simply professional, shared patient cases, overlapping shifts, and collaborative procedures. But with each encounter, the air between them seemed to shift ever so slightly. Adrian noticed Maria's attentiveness, not just to patients, but to him. She asked thoughtful questions about procedures, showed genuine interest in his explanations, and often lingered longer than necessary. For Maria, Adrian's calm authority and quiet confidence were magnetic, but she also sensed something beneath the surface, a restlessness, a hunger for something more than the predictable routines of life. Lunch breaks became subtle opportunities to converse beyond medical matters. They exchanged ideas about treatments, patient care, and hospital policy, but slowly, these conversations drifted into personal territory. Adrian learned about Maria's life in the Philippines, her dreams, and the sacrifices she had made to come to Singapore. She listened with curiosity to his stories, lightly probing the private corners of a life that seemed so polished to everyone else. There was a tension, electric yet carefully restrained, in the way they shared these moments. As the weeks passed, small gestures became more deliberate. Adrian found himself making excuses to be near Maria during rounds. She responded in kind, offering help with tasks that didn't require her assistance, lingering just long enough to make his presence feel significant. No one else noticed the subtle signals, the stolen glances, or the lingering proximity that grew between them. Both were cautious, aware of the stakes. Adrian had a family and a reputation to protect. Maria knew the professional consequences of crossing boundaries. Yet the pull between them was undeniable, a magnetic force neither could resist. What began as curiosity evolved into desire, a dangerous connection built on secrecy, temptation, and the thrill of the forbidden. By the time either fully realized the depth of their attraction, the affair had already begun in its most delicate, perilous form. Adrian and Maria's connection deepened quietly, hidden beneath layers of professional decorum. They became experts at communicating without leaving evidence, an exchanged glance, a lingering touch on a chart, a carefully worded email that seemed purely professional but carried unspoken meaning. Their secret world existed in the brief pauses between shifts, in the moments when no one else was watching. Adrian found himself looking forward to these stolen moments with an intensity he hadn't felt in years, while Maria carefully measured her responses, aware of the fine line they were treading. Late at night, when the hospital corridors were empty and the hum of machines filled the air, Adrian would sometimes linger near the nurse's station, finding reasons to speak with Maria. She responded with quiet warmth, never crossing obvious boundaries, yet the tension between them was undeniable. They developed a language of subtle signals, an eyebrow raised, a soft smile, a touch on a patient file, that allowed them to communicate their feelings without speaking them aloud. These interactions became a secret thrill, a hidden escape from the rigid structure of their daily routines. Outside the hospital, the careful measures they took to conceal their relationship grew more intricate. Encrypted messaging apps, deleted call logs, and private notes ensured that no trace remained. Adrian began to feel both excitement and guilt, the two emotions intertwined in a way that made him simultaneously exhilarated and tense. Maria, ambitious and cautious, recognized the power of their clandestine connection and the danger it carried. Colleagues began to notice subtle changes in their behavior. Adrian appeared distracted at times, his focus shifting unexpectedly. Maria's professionalism remained intact, but her occasional absences and whispered conversations with Adrian did not go completely unnoticed. Though suspicion lingered in the air, neither of them had yet made a misstep that could expose the affair. Each day, the tension grew, and the stakes became higher, pushing both of them deeper into a dangerous game of desire and secrecy from which there might be no escape. The affair that had begun as a subtle, secret attraction began to unravel in ways neither Adrian nor Maria had anticipated. What had once been thrilling now carried an undercurrent of tension. Small mistakes, easily overlooked at first, began to accumulate. A patient chart left carelessly on a desk, a lingering glance noticed by a curious colleague, and the subtle whispers of others started to form a pattern. The hospital, a place of order and precision, suddenly felt like a minefield where every movement could trigger suspicion. Adrian became increasingly distant at home. The guilt of hiding his secret began to weigh heavily on him, manifesting as irritability and distraction. His wife noticed the subtle shifts in his behavior, longer hours at the hospital, late-night calls, and an unusual preoccupation with trivial details, but Adrian carefully masked the truth, fearing the consequences of exposure. Maria, on the other hand, grew frustrated by the unpredictability of Adrian's behavior. The excitement of their secret liaison began to clash with her sense of pride and desire for recognition. Rumors began to circulate quietly among hospital staff. Nothing was ever stated directly, but subtle observations were pieced together into speculation. Whispers about unexplained absences and unusual interactions reached the ears of those paying attention. The tension between Adrian and Maria became almost palpable. Each knew they were walking on a knife's edge, but neither wanted to end what had begun, despite knowing that the stakes were higher than ever. The thrill of secrecy had morphed into a dangerous game. Both Adrian and Maria understood that one misstep could bring everything crashing down, their careers, reputations, and personal lives. What had begun as a momentary spark of desire was now a simmering storm of risk, guilt, and mistrust. The hidden affair that had felt so exhilarating was teetering on the brink of disaster, and neither was prepared for the consequences that were about to strike. The weight of betrayal and tension began to shift Maria's thoughts in a darker direction. The thrill of their affair, once intoxicating, now felt like a trap. She had given her trust and her heart to Adrian, only to be met with secrecy, manipulation, and the constant reminder that he was married. Each encounter left her feeling more humiliated, more enraged at the imbalance of power between them. Adrian, with his wealth, reputation, and carefully controlled life, seemed untouchable, while she was left vulnerable, exposed, and quietly seething. It was during one quiet night in the hospital, while reviewing patient files, that Maria discovered a detail Adrian had never shared: he had a history of HIV treatment from years prior. The revelation shocked her initially, but as anger and humiliation began to take hold, a dangerous idea formed in her mind. If Adrian had betrayed her, if he had manipulated her trust while keeping secrets, then perhaps the scales could be turned. Maria's medical knowledge gave her the tools to enact a plan, one that could change the course of their hidden relationship forever. She began to observe Adrian more carefully, noting his routines, his habits, and the moments when he was least alert. Every gesture, every movement, was catalogued in her mind. Maria weighed the risks meticulously, considering the consequences of discovery, yet the desire for revenge outweighed her caution. Each passing day of Adrian's careless confidence fueled her resolve. By the end of the week, Maria had formulated a plan. It was precise, calculated, and chilling in its simplicity. She would not act impulsively, every step was to be measured, ensuring that no suspicion would immediately fall on her. The excitement of control replaced the thrill of passion, and a quiet, dangerous anticipation settled in her mind. The affair, once a secret pleasure, had transformed into the groundwork for a carefully orchestrated revenge. Maria waited patiently, blending back into her professional routine as if nothing had changed. She knew that precision was everything. A single misstep could expose her and ruin the plan she had carefully constructed. Using her knowledge of hospital procedures, she found an opportunity when Adrian's attention was fully occupied with a high-risk patient. A small vial of his blood, left unattended for a routine test, became the instrument of her plan. She handled it quietly, carefully, ensuring that no one noticed her movements, her calm demeanor hiding the storm of intentions beneath. Over the next few days, subtle changes in Adrian's behavior went unnoticed by everyone but him. It started with fatigue that he attributed to long shifts, small fevers, and inexplicable aches. At first, he dismissed them, convincing himself that stress and overwork were to blame. But the symptoms worsened, becoming harder to ignore. Adrian's energy drained rapidly, and routine tasks began to feel impossible. He sought medical advice immediately, confident that a doctor's insight would offer clarity. Multiple tests were performed, but the results were baffling. Adrian, meticulous and careful in his life, could not understand how he could suddenly become so ill. The initial confusion soon turned into fear, a creeping anxiety that something far more serious was happening. Meanwhile, Maria maintained her composed exterior. She continued her duties with diligence, hiding the satisfaction she felt as Adrian's condition worsened. No one suspected her involvement. To colleagues, she remained the competent, reliable nurse they had come to trust. But behind her calm exterior, a sense of grim accomplishment settled in, and the plan she had meticulously conceived was unfolding exactly as she intended. The first seed of suspicion had been planted, but Adrian had no idea the danger came not from a virus alone, but from the very person he had trusted most. The stage was set for a shocking revelation that would change both their lives forever. Adrian's health continued to deteriorate, and the situation grew increasingly alarming. Simple tasks that had once been effortless, walking upstairs, reviewing patient charts, even performing routine medical procedures, now left him exhausted. His sharp mind, usually quick and decisive, felt foggy and uncertain. At first, he blamed stress, the long hours, and the relentless pace of his work. But as the symptoms intensified, denial became impossible. Fever, fatigue, and unusual rashes signaled something far more serious. He underwent a battery of tests, each one more invasive and stressful than the last. Doctors were baffled by the results, and Adrian began to feel a creeping panic. The diagnosis finally came like a thunderclap: HIV. Shock, disbelief, and fear overtook him. He had always been meticulous about his health, careful and cautious in every aspect of his life. How could this have happened? Questions raced through his mind, and trust shattered as he realized someone close might have been involved. Colleagues whispered behind closed doors, speculating about possible accidents or exposures, but no one could provide answers. Adrian felt the humiliation of his situation pressing down on him. In the hospital where he had once commanded respect, he now moved cautiously, wary of every glance and comment. Friends and co-workers who had admired his composure noticed his uncharacteristic vulnerability, though the true cause remained hidden. Amid the confusion, suspicion began to surface, subtle yet persistent. Adrian started piecing together minor anomalies, the chart left out of place, the subtle hints of Maria's presence near the incidents, the moments when she seemed unusually composed. A quiet dread took root, the possibility that this was not a random misfortune but a deliberate act. The realization filled him with fear and disbelief. The very person he had trusted, the one who had been closest to him, might have turned his life into a nightmare. The investigation into Adrian's sudden HIV infection began quietly, almost imperceptibly, but it quickly gained momentum as subtle inconsistencies emerged. Hospital administrators, alarmed by the unusual circumstances surrounding a respected doctor's diagnosis, called in a team of internal investigators. Every detail of Adrian's daily routine, his interactions with colleagues, and the handling of medical samples came under scrutiny. Records were cross-checked, security footage reviewed, and patient files meticulously examined. Nothing was overlooked, and the detectives moved with calculated precision. As the investigation unfolded, small but telling discrepancies began to appear. Certain vials had been accessed outside of standard procedures, and security footage captured fleeting moments of Maria lingering near Adrian's personal items. The investigators were methodical, piecing together the evidence like a puzzle. Each observation was catalogued, analyzed, and compared against hospital protocols. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge, one that pointed unmistakably toward deliberate interference. Maria, outwardly calm and professional, continued her duties, confident that her careful planning had left no trace. But the investigators' persistence began to chip away at her composure. The quiet scrutiny, the repeated questions, and the subtle but intense examination of her movements revealed cracks in the carefully constructed facade. Every tiny decision she had made, every small risk she had taken, was now exposed to cold, analytical eyes. The evidence, once compiled, painted a damning picture. Investigators traced the contamination directly back to Maria's access, confirming that her actions had been deliberate and calculated. It was a shocking revelation, not only for Adrian but for the entire hospital. The betrayal by someone so trusted, so close, stunned colleagues and friends alike. What had started as a hidden affair had escalated into a dangerous act of revenge, leaving Adrian to grapple with both his illness and the betrayal of the one person he had allowed into his most private world. The revelation of Maria's deliberate action sent shockwaves through the hospital and beyond. What had been a quiet internal investigation suddenly became a public scandal, dominating headlines and social media feeds. Singaporeans were captivated and horrified, struggling to comprehend how a trusted nurse could betray a respected doctor so profoundly. Colleagues and patients alike were stunned, grappling with feelings of disbelief and fear. The carefully maintained image of the hospital as a place of safety and professionalism had been shattered, exposing vulnerabilities that no one had anticipated. Adrian, already struggling with the physical and emotional toll of his diagnosis, now faced the intense glare of public scrutiny. Friends, family, and colleagues watched as his life unraveled in ways he could never have imagined. Questions about his personal life, his professional judgment, and the nature of his relationship with Maria were raised repeatedly, often in harsh and judgmental tones. He had to navigate not only the fear and pain of illness but also the humiliation of becoming a public figure in a scandal that seemed impossible to escape. Meanwhile, Maria became a focus of widespread fascination and condemnation. News outlets dissected every detail of her actions, painting her as both calculated and vengeful. Discussions erupted about workplace ethics, trust, and the dangers of secret relationships in professional environments. Some viewers expressed horror at her meticulous planning, while others, in morbid curiosity, speculated about her motives and psychological state. The line between news and entertainment blurred, leaving her both infamous and scrutinized from every angle. The scandal exposed the fragile balance of power, trust, and secrecy that had existed between them. Families, colleagues, and the public were forced to confront the harsh reality that betrayal could come from the closest and most trusted people in their lives. Adrian's suffering and Maria's calculated revenge became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of desire, deceit, and revenge. The courtroom became the final stage where the consequences of the secret affair and calculated revenge were laid bare. Maria sat calmly, her demeanor composed, as prosecutors detailed the deliberate contamination and betrayal that had upended Adrian's life. Evidence of her careful planning, the timeline of her actions, and the meticulous manipulation of hospital protocols left little room for doubt. Every calculated step, once hidden beneath her professional exterior, was now exposed under harsh scrutiny. The public watched closely, captivated by the drama that had started quietly in hospital corridors and ended in a devastating revelation. Adrian, seated in the courtroom, faced not only the physical toll of his illness but the emotional weight of betrayal and public humiliation. His career, once pristine, had been tarnished by a combination of health issues and the scandal that made headlines across Singapore. He struggled to reconcile the man he thought he knew with the reality of Maria's actions. Friends and family tried to provide support, but even their reassurances could not erase the sting of deception or the long-term impact of the diagnosis he now faced. The verdict was harsh. Maria received a severe sentence for her calculated actions, reflecting both the gravity of her crime and the betrayal of trust within a professional environment. While the legal system delivered justice, the emotional and social consequences lingered far beyond the courtroom. Adrian faced years of treatment, ongoing medical monitoring, and the constant reminder of how a single act of revenge had irreversibly altered his life. The story became a cautionary tale about trust, secrecy, and the destructive power of hidden desires. Lives could be ruined in an instant when ambition, anger, and betrayal collided. What had begun as a clandestine affair had escalated into a tragedy that would be remembered not only for its scandal but for the devastating human cost. In the end, both Adrian and Maria were left to live with the consequences of choices that had once seemed so small yet carried irreversible weight.